Okay, in the second part of section 4.8 here, we're talking about being able to multiply complex numbers, okay, and then we're going to have to simplify things. One of the things that we're going to do in this video, in this first part of the video, is we're going to take two monomials, that's two one-term items, multiply them together, okay, and then we're going to simplify. For example, if I go with a one-term item, a monomial, it would be like taking 3x times 2x, which I would get 6 and then x squared. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is x squared. Okay. That would be two monomials. The second one, if there's a monomial times a binomial, then you're going to use the distributive property. That's the second part of today as well. So for example, if I have this 3x times x plus 2, again, you've seen this before, so this is not anything new. We're going to distribute the 3. So 3 times x is 3x squared, and 3x times 2 is 6x. Okay, so those are the two things that we're going to be looking at here in this video. We're going to multiply monomials, we're going to multiply a monomial and a binomial, or a one-term item and a two-term item for today. Okay, so one other thing that we got to talk about here is, remember, if you remember, I is the square root of -1, okay? So if I multiply I and I together, I get I squared. Or, remember, I is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. Well, if I do those two together, that's the square root of -1 squared. Wait, what does a square and a square root do to each other? Well, they cancel each other out. What's left? Well, in this case, it's only -1. So anytime you see an I squared, we're going to make that a -1. Only if it's I squared. Okay, if it's I, you leave it just the way it is. If it's I squared, we're going to make it -1. Or, in other words, we're going to change whatever sign it is. So if that number is positive with an I squared, it's going to become negative. If that number is negative with an I squared, it's going to become positive. Okay, so that's going to be an important part of what we're going to look at today. Make sure you have this part right here written in your notes. The I squared is equal to -1. Because we're going to substitute that in to simplify. Okay, so let's take a look at the first example here. 7i times 3i. These are two monomials. And all we're going to do here is we're going to multiply these guys together. So 7 times 3 is 21. I times I is I squared. Okay, now remember, I squared is -1. So this is essentially 21 times -1. So 21 times -1 is -21. Okay, now another way you can look at this, the way I've kind of taught this in the past, is anytime you see an I squared, okay, you cross out the I squared and you take and change whatever symbol it is. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. Okay, but -21 is your simplified answer. You cannot have I squared in any of your answers. You will never have I squared in any of your answers. Okay, let's take a look here at the second one. This is a distributive property one. Again, as we look through, let's go here. We're going to distribute then 3i. So 3i times -5 is -15 and an I. So 3 times -5 is -15, and I times nothing is I. Then we're going to take 3i times 2i. Well, 3i, or 3 times 2 is 6. I times I is I squared. So that I squared is going to change that symbol. We're going to cross it out, make it the opposite. So it's going to be -6. Now, remember, a complex number is always written with a real number first and the imaginary number second. Okay? So when we write this, we always want to flip these around. So it's going to be -6 and -15i. Okay? So that's an example of one with the distributive property. All right, let's take a look. Now, this example here will not be on your notes, so you want to write this one down. Let's go with negative 5i times the quantity. Let's go negative 2 and plus 6i. Okay, so on this one, again, we're going to distribute. So I distribute here and here. So negative 5i times negative 2 is positive 10i. And then negative 5i times positive 6i is negative 30i squared. Okay, so the I squared is going to become negative 1, which means I cross this guy out, I make that a positive. So that says 10i plus 30. But remember, when we do this, the real number has to go first. So I'm going to have 30 plus 10i. Okay, so the biggest thing to remember here is to remember distributive property, multiplying two monomials, but the biggest thing to remember is that I squared is going to be negative 1, and so whenever we have an I squared, cross it out, change the symbol in front. Okay? All right, you should be able to complete your class kick problems here for 4-8 day 3.